Hello, hello, everybody. We are live. This
He-
is brand new.
We are
New
here. We're
thing
going to
for
do
us.
it. Yeah. No edits.
No,
Gotta watch my mouth. Gotta make
that's
sure I
right.
don't say anything stupid, which is very hard.
Chewman, how you doing?
I'm doing amazing, man. Blessed like always. Today is the day the Lord has made. How about you, brother?
Oh, I have a hurt ankle, and so everything takes twice as long.
Dude, you gotta stop playing soccer with your kids, man.
I know, but you know what? I'm still blessed. Still blessed. We got a new coffee maker, so we can finally make our coffee.
Oh yeah, there you
It's new
go.
coffee. Uh,
Oh,
every day it's new coffee,
I know you're living off of coffee, man. I know your schedule. So
right?
without it, I don't know where you'd be in life without it.
That's right. And today I'm drinking Gerolsteiner. It's
Is,
bringing.
is it
It's a
sparkling or just normal
Yeah, it's a
water?
sparkling water. This is
See,
really high mineral content, which I'm happy about.
that's good. Oh, see, you must be rich because only rich people drink sparkling water. You know that, right?
Right, the bubbles cost extra.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, this got high, like a lot of magnesium. This is 20% of my magnesium for the day.
That's good, man,
There you go.
and it makes it taste better too. So
Hmm.
it's a win-win.
So
Isn't it?
that's my beverage. You're getting your coffee down. I see.
Oh yeah, I already got that in me. Yeah, got all jazzed up now.
Right on. I am not confident on who is going to be joining us today. It's kind of a little bit early for a lot of folks on a Sunday. This just happens to be what the time slot we normally record. So
Yeah.
that's why we're here, just doing it live. And a couple of reasons we wanted to go live. Today is a day of significance, right?
Oh yeah, big day.
For a couple of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
For if anyone is interested, 9/11, September the 11th is quite possibly the actual date of the birth of Jesus. So Merry Christmas.
Absolutely, hallelujah.
And
Praise God.
I can drop a link in the, if anyone cares about that, I can drop a link in the description once we're done here. But yeah, so highly likely this is the actual birth date of Jesus. As we get closer to Christmas, maybe we'll do a Christmas little Christmas special too, and
Sounds
talk about
good.
some of these different things and whatever. But
Let's do
that's
it.
only one of the things,
Oh
right?
yeah, I know, man. There's a lot on this day. It's a big,
September 11th is
big day.
also a day where a lot of people, it makes them sad.
A huge traumatic event for the hive mind of humanity.
Yeah,
Big, big.
and you know what? I do want to say from the, we are going to talk about 9/11. We're obviously going to talk about World Trade Center, a lot of different things.
Yep.
But the first thing that I do want to say is I know that for this day there are thousands of people whose loved ones died today.
Yep.
Someone's father, someone's mother, someone's sister, someone's brother, whatever the relation, friend, neighbor, all those different things died today. So today is a different meaning, even a third meaning, right? It, it's it,
100%.
it it's a day that no matter what, if it was in a plane, in a building, wherever else, maybe firefighter, maybe other emergency personnel, whatever that was, in losing a loved one, that is traumatic. It's an event worth grieving and mourning, and so for that loss, we we offer condolences. We are, we will pray for you, today, and that day of remembrance, because it's a day of remembrance for a different reason. There's a different reason that you will never forget. So
Mm-hmm.
put that out there. I don't know who's gonna watch this, right? But
Yep.
so anyway, say that from the outset. No matter what's said, that right off the bat is the first thing to really go to remember and to focus on for a lot of people is tragic death. Right? So condolences that way.
100%. Yep.
But at the same time, this event affected more than just individuals. Right? It was more than just a tragedy where some people died. There were some big ramifications for the events that took place on September 11th, 21 years ago.
Yep.
And this is one of those events that, just like JFK, everyone remembers where they were when
When it happened.
they heard about it. I totally remember. Do you remember? I don't
Oh,
know how
I,
old
re-
you were.
I remember I was like 8 years old. I was in Reno with my parents, and
The
because it was a
biggest little
Tuesday.
city in the world.
Oh man, yes, and I think it was the day we were about to leave, and I remember waking up in the hotel room, and then my dad came in, and he's like kind of frantic to turn on the TV because he was in the elevator, I guess, and some lady was like, "Hey, did you hear what happened? It's horrible." And he had no idea. I was like, "What?" So then he ran in and then turned it on, and then at that time, because obviously the pandemonium of, well, we're being attacked, we don't know what's happening, so and we weren't home per se, we're on vacation, so they were like, all right, gotta get home, we guys gotta get out of here, we don't know what's going on, so kind of
Right.
rushed out of there, got home. So yeah, very cemented in the mind of that event for sure, very traumatic. So like you said, it's perfect where everyone remembers where they were when that event happened. It's very important to us.
Yeah, I mean, actually think about that. If you were traveling, that had to be even
Oh, terrifying, man.
more terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if you're at an airport, or because you had to obviously shut down the flights, or you're in. Yeah, you had no idea what was going on.
Right. I hadn't thought about that. I was, oh, let's see, how old was I? I think I was 19 or 20.
Okay.
I was at school, waking up in the dorm. Of course, we're West Coasters, so
Hmm.
um, West Coast, it's way earlier, 3 hours earlier.
Yep.
And remember waking up and I had my roommate who was like, "Oh my gosh, something's happening." My dad texted me at that same time. I know it was a long time ago, but we did have phones with
Yep.
texting capability.
Mhm.
And remember him telling me that there was something going on. And then I had to go to class though. It was one of those where it's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, it's terrible." So ended up going and seeing it on we went right to class, and then they said, "You know what? This is we're not going to have class today."
Yep. Go home.
And so we just all went to the little cafe where there's a TV and watched things happen. So
Yep.
I remember really distinct. I remember like the room I was in. I remember all those different details because of hearing that on that morning. So
Well, and it's the
um,
first real event where you had television, right? Because like JFK, you're speaking about, where there was no TV, they had radio. So it wasn't as, I mean, people would still collect around the radio, but now you have a visual with how television works. So you have this first type of world event where everyone could just be around the television watching it live go down. So it's there's nothing else that really compares to it. I mean, even with COVID that came up, it's like, people watch TV, but there wasn't like one day where this giant event happened. Like the entire world is just watching TV, just memorized by what's going on, and the visuals of it are unbelievable. Like going back and rewatching documentaries or film of it, it still is just. It's almost, we're living in a movie. You're watching the scenes. You're like, what is going? This is so insane. It is, yeah, very very insane.
it was for a lot of people one of those watershed moments, right? That kind of marked a change.
Big big time.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different emotions, and a lot of people, you may have been in one of those places where if you or a relative were working in an airport, for instance, or working in a fill in the blank, one of these places that's immediately and directly impacted by something like that, there's different kinds of panic and frantic that happens during something like that cements that in the brain, in
Yeah.
the mind. I think I mean we could talk about just that aspect for quite a while, but I think one of the things that happens, and this is going to kind of lead us to what we're talking about today.
Hmm.
What ends up happening is when there's an event that big and shared and tragic, what what starts to happen is obviously we remember where we were, but some of the details that happen, what wherever we eventually land on what those details, those facts mean, we now have a personal stake in that because we have an emotional attachment to that event. And so JFK is the perfect example. So there were people who questioned what happened, and there's because everyone has an emotional attachment to that's where it led to really like flared emotion, even if you had nothing to do with it. You you weren't there. Your family wasn't directly impacted, but you saw it. There's an emotional attachment because of the shared tragic, observation of it, the viewing of it, that you then attach a lot of uh, emotional elements to the details of. And so that's where it starts to get really, really weird and choppy, because even 21 years later, there are still parts of that story that you look at that seem to not make sense. And that's what we kind of want to talk about. There's so many different ways you can go. And so when Matt and I were talking about this, talked about, just let's focus on one. What is one aspect or one detail, one part of this that really throws a wrench in the bigger story? Because I can tell you what, in this live broadcast, we will not come to an end.
No.
Right? We can't.
It's hours of content with this subject. Yeah.
And even if we were spent hours and hours, there's still people who are debating details on this thing 21 years later. So we're not going to come to a final solution and have all the boxes ticked and have all of the details gone through and figured out. It's not the objective, and it's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So if you're tuning in for that, that's not going to happen.
Now, I like how you brought up the JFK situation, because from that you had the creation of the term conspiracy theorist to then tie that to the emotions, which is still just from that birth is just held on 50, 60 years later to now today. Even when you question any type of narrative, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist, it's just this blanket statement that is able to just wipe away anything you say because it's attached to emotions. They have, what I've noticed, and you notice a lot of times with any type of story that comes out, the first thing that is spoken about and the first narrative, the first story that enters the mind of an individual usually sticks. So something can come out, a story will come out, the newscaster or whoever will say it, and even if it's wrong, that's the first fact or first whatever information that enters the mind of the individual. Now that's what they believe. No matter what happens in the future, whether that newscast or paper redacts and changes, hey, we were wrong, that doesn't matter. It's already implanted into the mind of the individual. And then if it's attached to emotions, so then if you contradict their narrative, then you're just a conspiracy theorist, just like with JFK. So that was like the birth of this psychological warfare with using words and terms, and kind of like a 1984 type of feel of changing definitions and being able to really control us through language.
Yeah, and sometimes in live time, right? So it's as it's happening and things are taking place. Some of these things are being redefined as it happens, and in that frantic. They always say, at least wise people will always say, don't make your biggest decisions when you're in an emotional state, right?
Yep.
So
cool off.
And maybe you've experienced this. Someone in your family dies. Maybe a pivotal, like a matriarch or patriarch in your family dies, and there are people who will say, I'm going to sell my house and move over here. And you say, you know what? Maybe take a day, or a week.
Sleep on it
before you make a huge decision. But it seems like when there's a tragic event, oftentimes people are pushed to make really big, huge, life-shattering decisions immediately. And I think that's one of the big problems is we push a lot of that stuff out there in that way when there is something tragic.
Oh yeah, there's something to be said about having high emotional intelligence. It's actually part of a book I'm going through right now by Nancy Misler, Be Transformed by the Renewing of Your Mind. But the idea of you can't control those immediate emotions right away, but you can then, after those emotions hit you, you can go down either those emotions and allowing yourself to then be dictated by your emotions, or you give those emotions to the Lord and you are guided by Him and you allow Him to then work in you, and you make decisions contrary to your emotions because you are with the Lord. It's His Spirit guiding you, not your own emotion or ego. So it's crucial though, man. And I don't know how, I know how hard it is as a Christian with the Holy Spirit. So I can't imagine not having the Holy Spirit and then trying to fight emotions and control that are trying to control you.
Right. And I'd say this, if you wait until a tragedy happens to try to figure something out, it's
Too late.
it's too late.
Yep.
You should think through some of these different things beforehand, which of course, how are you going to think about a tragic event and some of the things that are happening? Not necessarily that, but even just putting some of those stops, like we're not going to make decisions. We're not going to make a final sort of call on something before, a certain period of time, whatever that looks like. So anyway, all that to say, there's so many different ways that we can go with this info, with these different things. My challenge to Matt was to find one to look at. And so, I don't know, do we flip a coin? Who's going first?
You're going first, brother.
I'm going first. Okay. I'm going first. So for me, and I was a bit older when I saw the event of 9/11 take place. And so, bigger decisions, bigger things. I remember we were getting ready I was going to go on a trip to go, work at some church somewhere is going on a mission. And, I remember in the training, they said, "Hey, we can't tell you what to do on an airplane if something like this happens." Like, it was very weird. Like, we can't tell you if you feel like you can make a difference and you're going to help people. Like, we can't tell you to not do that. It was very weird sort of things that were like impacted a lot of different things. So, I didn't settle in on the narrative, but I was very like, okay, this is the info we have. And I remember a few years later, as I was looking through some of those things, it dawned on me when I was watching some of the footage there was something that didn't quite fit. And so what I want to do is I want to add, we'll look at this here. So if you are looking for information, a lot of people go to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is going to give you the established, accepted story for things. So looking through this, if you want to see the established story, it's here. But most people obviously can recite a lot of the details that are around this, by heart. They know this. So if you go through, you can see Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, all these different things. But there's something. Sorry if I make you seasick. But there's something that doesn't seem to make it in a lot of people's minds. It is forgotten. So if you look here, the first impact, Miracle Flight 11, highlighted all here, at 8:46 to the North Tower at 9:03. South Tower was hit by Flight 175. That's nice. It even shows the flight path.
Mm-hmm.
Both 110-story towers collapsed within an hour and 42 minutes, precipitating the collapse of the other World Trade Center structure, other World Trade Center structures, including World Trade Center Building 7. This detail has always bothered me. And this for me is if you still say that the established story is exactly true, you have to deal with Building 7.
Dude, don't you know the buildings just collapse on their own? You don't have to. Nothing has to happen. No,
apparently, anyone who's ever worked with metal knows that fire, just a normal fire outside of a forge, can affect steel. That's a discussion for the towers. World Trade Center 7 was never hit by anything, had minimal fires going on, and yet it completely fell into its own footprint. That, for me, was enough to say there's something wrong here. I had family members who worked with metal, worked with thermite, worked with those types of things, so that we even would mess around with it, right?
Yeah.
Being dangerous, and just can tell you, this can't happen.
Oh no,
this is impossible.
Yeah, because I went to trade school for welding, so obviously working with different types of metals, how to use oxyacetylene and cutting, and knowing the temperature that steel will actually, you can cut through or melt, and even with that, it doesn't turn into what we saw those buildings turn into. And I always like using the math, like 2 planes, 3 buildings. It just doesn't, it just does not add up. Like, just it really doesn't at the very base level. Just using any minimum type of logic.
Yeah, and especially for Building 7, because it was such an important building. This actually housed, so if there was any other emergency anywhere else in the city, that would have been the center for a center of command. That's where they would have been staging, the fire departments to do whatever they're doing, police, whatever. That was that building. They also had offices for other type of law enforcement, other things, record keeping, all that kind of stuff was all kept in that building.
Yep.
That should have been the building that they would have been in a normal emergency. And I understand why they wouldn't have been in it during that emergency, because it's right next door to the emergency.
Yep.
But at the same time, that building was not just a building to just destroy. And yet that's actually what the owner of World Trade Center, Larry Silverstein, what he actually said in an interview was, there'd been so much tragedy that day, we decided to pull it. Well,
was it? Yeah,
pulling it is a term that's used for the actual demolition of buildings.
Yep.
These things take months to plan, to put, specific explosives, all that kind of thing. And then for some reason, that morning they decided to pull a building that wasn't scheduled to be demolished. So that's what really made me say, you know what, maybe I just need to look into think of that. And I'm not here this morning trying to tell anyone who did it, what happened. All I'm saying is you have to deal with it. It's a detail that has to be looked at. It can't just be brushed under the rug or swept under the rug. It's important to look at this, because if the story works, the story works. And this is a major problem for the story. I'm trying to avoid adding other clips to this live stream because I don't want this taken down or whatever before we're finished. But there's even a news report that came out of the UK. So
the
live,
BBC, right? Yeah.
It was the BBC. Yep. And they reported that Building 7 collapsed. And as they're reporting it, the reporter is standing there, and behind her is the building still standing. And you can look at the timestamps of the video and the timestamp of when the event took place to say this was actually released too early. And I know that sounds super conspiratorial, right?
Yep.
But it happened. So again, Building 7, Larry Silverstein said that they just decided to pull it, which is impossible.
He also pulled an insurance policy out right that summer for all of it. There's so many.
Yeah, the end of July, he pulls out a new insurance policy on that whole complex, and then he had the audacity to after this thing to really argue with the insurance company to say there's two separate attacks, one on each building, so he should get double, and he ended up getting it. It's $7 billion. So again, another seven, right? $7 billion.
Perfect number.
Payout. Completion. So. Yeah, it's so funny, right? But all that to say, I don't know who specifically is doing this thing. I don't know what, but I can't tell you. It was used as an opportunity, at least for Silverstein, used as an opportunity to make $7 billion. And I think that's one of the things for me is a lot of people think that if you're going to question something, that unless you have it all lined out, who did it, what time, all those different things, then it's not worth really looking at. And I would say for the most part, you're not going to ever have every piece from beginning to end. What you're going to have is enough questions to say, I don't know if that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for most people, when events like this take place, opportunists, evil people, but maybe people who weren't doing evil things take the opportunity to see a benefit, right? That's always what you got to ask, who benefits. An opportunity happens, and so then they seize it, right? They jump on the opportunity to benefit from something. So I think that's one of the things that comes out. Like, I'm not saying that thousands of people all conspired to do a thing. I'm saying that a thing may have happened, and some people saw an opportunity and took an opportunity because they're ready for it.
It's so important to not be dogmatic when it comes to, unless you're talking about the doctrine of Christ and salvation. But outside of that, being dogmatic about anything with what you believe, you have to have some flexibility and be able to be open-minded enough to go, okay, I am a finite creature. I don't know exactly, but I need to have an open mind to take in information and receive information. So then you filter it, and then, all right, well, this doesn't make sense, I'll throw it over here. This makes somewhat sense, I'll put it over here, and learn how to compartmentalize information to then, connect the dots. Because if you have the narrative in your mind and you are attached to emotions like you were speaking about before, then your mind is closed. You can't think properly. You can't use any type of ration or logic, where you need to be able to be open-minded enough to for the possibilities, especially if you're a Christian, because you're saying you don't know exactly who, but we know spiritually who. I mean, whenever there's death and destruction, we know the Prince of Darkness is behind it some way, somehow. So we may not know the individuals of, who he's pulling the strings, but we know the entity behind it all. So very
Right.
important for us to keep that in mind.
I would actually challenge you on one of those things. You're mentioning the only thing that we can be dogmatic about is Christ and him crucified and salvation. I would say, even that's something. So from my own perspective, if something is true, you should be able to walk up to it and test it and push it and hit it with a bat and not try to knock it over. And if it doesn't get knocked over, you'd say like that's pretty strong.
Mhm.
That's something true. So I would say even in that, the only way that you can be dogmatic about anything is something that you have looked into, questioned, and tested.
Yeah.
And it comes out the other side as being able to stand.
Yep.
And so even in all of those things, that's why there are things where you can say, I know that this is true because I've tested it, I've seen it,
Mhm.
and it's made it out the other end, and it's still standing. So even with that, ask the questions. And
100%.
for most of these things that we're talking about, and we'll talk about in the future, we got plans to talk about other things. All we're saying is ask the question. If anyone ever tells you don't ask that question, that you're in a bad spot. If there are things that no one is allowed to ask questions about, we're in a really bad place. If someone can't speak out against, did you see that?
You cut out.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
So again, danger.
Here we go.
If we get cut off or we get
Yeah.
lose it, it's always ask the questions, because if something is true and something is able to withstand the questioning, then you can rely on it. Then you can rest it. Isn't that the cornerstone of science?
It is, man. And what's so important too, especially to the fellow Christians that have the mindset of, oh, that's a conspiracy theorist, or that are closed-minded to even, te- you know, thinking about ideas, whether it's 9/11, JFK, whatever it may be. You need to remember the Bible that you believe is God's word is filled with a huge conspiracy from Satan to try to destroy the seed of the Messiah. That there is That's the entire biblical story, that there's a conspiracy to try to destroy God's creation and his plan for redemption of humankind. So if Satan is this giant adversary that is using this idea of conspiring behind God, why would he then not use certain things nowadays? And his children, the sons of disobedience, the sons of darkness, would not be using things. So it's just, you need to be able to have an open mind if you are a Christian. It just always breaks my heart when I see fellow brothers and sisters that are just lockstep with the narrative, and whether they believe it or not, it's just, I want to see the mindset of being open-minded to at least look at it. Like you're bringing up, test them, test the theories, test it, make sure, if you are going to be dogmatic about it, go through it and make sure that it holds up. Don't just sit there and believe something because you've been told it, but then now your emotions are tied to it, so then you're not going to even allow it. So it's just showing a lack of maturity, emotionally and then intellectually, but it is what it is.
I think it can, and I think it's important to say, if this is something that you've never looked into, it's not our human attention. It can only be directed certain places, certain times, right? So
Yeah.
you ask my wife, what was the your favorite? What was the what am I trying to say? What was the most popular music for the past 10 years? And for a lot of that, she may not know because she was busy raising kids,
Yep.
right? Her focus
Exactly.
was somewhere else. So then there's other things that she may have been focused on. I'm not saying she's totally ignorant of all that stuff, but just saying she's not going to have the same investment or
No.
ability to focus or invest in a certain type of information. So there are people who have been able to focus on some of these things. And this is part of the beauty of just human interaction, but even just fellowship with people. So when you can get with people who we're good no matter what. We can have disagreements no matter what. So
Yep.
what are you focusing on? Let's have a discussion. And it might be something I'm not focusing on.
Yep.
We can have the discussion to draw my attention over there and look at a thing. And then we can have a conversation. And even if you're way farther down the road, and I think that's part of the problem, right? Here, let me drop. I've focused on this for years. So let me drop 1,000 facts on you. And most people after the second or third are going to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't have time for this. I don't want to talk about this. I'm fine with the perspective I have. And I think that's part of the issue as well. Because you actually brought up something that I had kind of heard about, but I hadn't even focused on this detail. So for me, the big detail for 9/11 that really made me start to question things was Building 7. So for you, what was one of those things that you wanted to bring out and talk about that really makes you think or question things?
Oh, it's the idea that if you're going to the narrative, so what's the narrative? That the pancake theory of these giant buildings that were some of the biggest buildings in the world that are full of tons of steel and concrete and debris, that if it would have fallen how they're telling you it fell, there would have been a pile of debris at the bottom of, the Trade Center foundation that would have been stacked up stories high. But when you look, there's no debris. I mean, it's actually concaved. It almost looks like an explosion went off, and there's just the debris not there, scientifically speaking. That where did that debris go? And then you watch some footage from like aerial camera helicopters from a distance, and you see Manhattan completely covered with this giant cloud of microscopic dust. This huge, just it completely engulfed the entire city, and you can look at it actually from like a GPS. They show footage that it just took over the entire city of New York and Manhattan. And it just doesn't make mathematical sense and scientific sense that to the theory that they're telling us. So what you have to do is you look at what they're telling you, the narrative. Okay, 2 planes with jet fuel turned 3 buildings into microscopic dust in front of our eyes, and then now you're looking at the remains, and there's no debris. I mean, there's nothing in the sense of, like, obviously there's some debris, but not to what their narrative is saying. It wasn't adding up. It wasn't making sense. One thing I want to add that you said earlier on, that because a lot of people that trust the narrative and because their emotions are tied, whenever you speak that against that narrative, their emotions get attacked because real people died. And I like what you brought up in the very beginning, that our condolences are out to the people that we are not real people died and real people's lives were affected, and the humanity of it is all there. And because real people died and because of the humanity, that is why, at least in my personal opinion, it's so crucial to find out the truth behind it, because I care about the people that died, and the people that had their lives affected deserve the truth. We deserve the truth to know what exactly happened and why these people actually died, instead of just following this narrative and being triggered immediately because people think that we're attacking it like, oh, it was a whole hoax and no one died. Like, no, real people were affected, and because of that, we should really look into it. But yeah, my big point, yours, Building 7, mine's there's no debris. Steel, concrete, and you're actually, if you look at, like, anyone that wants to go back and watch some of the tapes in slow motion, you can watch the building while it's falling apart. Instead of it just falling in on itself, you're seeing like pieces of concrete falling outward and turning to dust in front of your eyes and going upward. Like it's not connecting to what they are trying to tell us what happened.
And that's something that was consistent, not just in the buildings, that was consistent with the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
The Flight 93, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And
also the Pentagon one too.
the Pentagon. So that was the other one that had a, that they said a plane crashed, but there's no plane debris.
Oh, and not to mention all the footage that they have. The Pentagon is like the most highly secure facility with cameras on every corner. You can't do nothing without it being filmed. And then there's no film. They go to the gas station, take that right away, and they show us one footage of like one frame of like a little. It looks like a missile, and then it hitting the building. It is so sketchy, man. It really is.
Yeah, just that question of debris. So here's what's funny. And we mentioned this before we started filming. First, I gotta say hi, Trinity. I'm glad you're here. Now we can get started. So
yeah.
The whole plot for Lost is gone if planes, when they crash, are obliterated.
Yep.
Right.
But a passport and a bandana will indestructible.
Right. So you've got the passports that show up in the tower rubble, and you had whatever rebel was there, and then you had the passport and a bandana, so paper and cloth.
Yep.
That, apparently the plane in Pennsylvania completely obliterated, but a piece of cloth that the handkerchief, I'm not sure why or how that connected them to the hijackers, but then also the passport, right? And so
It,
it's like, how are
it,
these things surviving perfectly,
it's
but the plane is
insane.
obliterated? Like,
It's insane that
we're talking airplanes that are made out of material that are made not to burn. That's, you can go and see, there's been other plane crashes you can look at where you see the debris. There's other building demolished, controlled demolitions. You can see where you see the debris. The debris is all there. That's actually a factor they have to take into account.
Yeah.
But it doesn't match up. The debris in these different places, this doesn't match up. So all we're saying is ask the question. And when you ask the question, you have to be honest when you ask the question.
Yep.
And to say, what is it? And we're not here telling you what it is. We're just saying you gotta ask the question. Be honest.
No, 100%, man. Yep. It's crucial.
So what are some of the thoughts that have come around? Like, what's some of the explanation for that? Is it just explosion, or?
Well, there's a good one for anyone that wants to look her up. It's actually still on YouTube. Dr. Judy Wood. She is a highly credited engineer. She in the field of engineering. She's not me. She's not some internet guy that doesn't have any type of degree regarding that field. So I yield to her mind and her experience. But she goes through an entire PowerPoint presentation to explain the theory of what happened to those buildings, and I believe she does a really good job. So I can't go over everything here; it wouldn't do it justice. But her name's Judy Wood, and she believes it was a direct energy weapons. They're called DEW, and it's the idea that you can change molecules and change particles, and pretty much just like they already have them right now for like if riot distribution and like taking care of like groups of people. They can shoot different types of waves or frequencies. Look at microwaves, and that's all technology where you can change things or heat things up. And that's her theory, though, that they use she says it's not a JFK event, but it was a Pearl Harbor event. Or no, it's not a Pearl Harbor event. It was a Hiroshima or Nagasaki event of a new technology that was used that we don't even understand and grasp. And if you really do look at the footage, it is like a mushroom cloud. Like, I'm not saying it was a nuke, but she's saying it's this new type of weaponry that they were able to use that turned concrete and steel beams into dust right in front of her eyes, where and then you have all these other weird things where like random cars on different parts of Manhattan just burst into flames and burnt down completely. And she's got pictures and footage of it. She shows the evidence of there's no debris, and she does the math of how much debris should have been there. If you're just going to the narrative, so you're taking what the government has told us and you're looking at it, okay, then there should have been, because she knows you can go back to the blueprints of how much concrete, how much steel was put into that project of making those two towers. Now let's use the math to how much of a pile there should have been at the base, and it's just not there. It should have been like a mountain of debris, and it's gone. It's just absolutely gone. People are breathing it. It's going down the street. Like, you have all this old footage. It's almost like Godzilla footage of people running down the street with this giant like mushroom cloud of dust, and it's all that debris that turned into dust right in front of your eyes. It's a really good documentary that I highly recommend to anyone out there that wants to further their information with this subject.
Yeah, once we're done with this live, I'll drop the links to some of the things we're looking at in the description. So, not necessarily available at this moment, but it will be later on at the rebroadcast. So if that's something you're interested in taking a look at, and I would recommend it. Look at the different things, ask the questions. If there's an area where you feel like you can never ask a question, you have to then ask yourself why. Why is there an area of a particular event, a topic that you're not allowed to look into? It's one of the things, I know this seems out there, but it's one of the things that people start to do when they start to deprogram themselves to leave a cult, is they start to ask questions, and the leadership says, you can't ask that question.
Yeah.
They say, why can't I ask that question? And it's a thing that leads you to figuring something out. I'm being really super vague, but it really comes down to that, is if you can't ask the question, there's something else you need to look at.
100%, man. And another reason what really, besides her information that just seemed really solid to me, it made the most sense because before I came across her information, you had like Zach guys or Loose Change, where the theory, like they obviously brought up the point of that the narrative doesn't make sense, so they catch you there. But then they try to tell you that thermite was used, or they put explosives, and to the like, because then you have a normal person that believes a narrative. They go, how does even me that doesn't believe the narrative? How does it make sense that you had I mean, you have hundreds of people going into those towers every day working. How could you keep that secret of people planting all these explosives in this build? It just that doesn't make logical sense to me personally that they did a controlled demolition like they usually do to a building like in Vegas or something that they're taking out a old hotel. Like so that's why I understand people that believe the narrative and then they get told, "Oh no, it wasn't that it was blown up by controlled demolition," and then their mind goes, "Well, how does that make sense? People put them like how could somebody should have saw people putting bombs in that doesn't so the direct energy weapon makes sense where you can do that covertly without people even knowing it." And it goes back to the idea that the government and the military, they have technology that is years in advance to us. We just get down the hand-me-downs. We can't we really have no idea what they have. Like we really
Hand
don't.
Hand Me Down is a great picture.
Oh,
Oh, we're done using this. We've got something better. You can have it. You can think of an older sibling just tossing you a pair of shoes. Hey, you can use that.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And
Yeah.
everything that's technology that we have comes from the military. I mean, that's what the internet, it's all based off of military and warfare, really.
Yeah, and I think that's another important thing is that there may be factors, there may be elements of this that are outside of our normal just realm of knowledge. There are things that are outside of that could definitely be used. Um, to answer some of those things, when Silverstein took out that new insurance policy and those stuff, that he also did completely change the security company and the detail, and all the people who were securing the building completely switched out. So a lot of people will say something could have happened, but again, something we don't know. We don't
Yeah,
know
we don't.
any of those different things
Yeah.
that could have happened. So, and I think we'll wrap it up here in a couple minutes. But I think the one of the things that we do want to try to really hit home is we aren't trying to in any way detract from the tragedy of the day, the deaths that did happen. What we're doing instead is trying to honor the people who did die, but either
100%.
either because they didn't know something was happening, or even more so, someone who did know what happened and they ran into a building to help or to rescue or to save or something,
Yeah.
right? So that you've got a lot of heroics that happened on that day, and it would be most honoring to them to figure out what really happened, in order to put some of those things to rest. There are a lot of people who feel like they don't have any kind of closure because they have some of these questions and no one will look into it.
Yep.
And
100%.
yeah, so
And, yeah.
yes, go
And
ahead.
I want to tie in if you could bring up Ephesians 5, 11 and 12,
Yep.
that is really critical. That I want to focus because say you're a believer in Christ and you're thinking that we are wasting our time trying to speak about subjects like this. And it's really important to remember our duty as children of light. So if we are Christians, which means we're little Christs, we're little anointed ones, we are in the light now, we're not in darkness anymore. So then we need to hold fast to, if we hear what Paul tells us, to expose darkness. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. For things that they do in secret are shameful even to mention. So the idea, and that's why I really want to hone in on, it doesn't matter what if the narrative was right or whether it's a conspiracy, who benefits in the sense of look at what happened after 9/11. Satan was able to get more of a foothold on controlling the population. You have a entire war kicked off in the Middle East that destroyed how many people's lives over there for different types of agendas that we can go off. You have, there's so many different rabbit holes you can go down. You have the loss of rights of Americans. That was pretty much the kickstart to this idea of the New World Order, or I mean, even though the New World Order was before that, was being spoken about, but that was a really big kickoff to taking our rights away. You have the Patriot Act, you have the TSA, which was supposed to be temporary, which obviously wasn't, and that ties into the event going in now, the last 2 years of this, this whole, I don't want, what's going on, the pandemic with being able to control people and lock us down even more. It's just stripping our rights away as humans, as humanity. And it's really critical as children of light that we are going to expose darkness when we see it. And whether it was a conspiracy or not, it doesn't matter. Satan was able to use it. In my personal opinion, it was a ritual. The dates line up to a ritual. The idea of taking out the two towers, the two pillars, destroying it. It was a sign of strength to a nation that is a Christian nation that tore us down. So it's just really critical to remember who's really behind these events in the world, that the prince of the power of the air, Satan himself, this is a spiritual war that we're going through. And it's so easy for us to get divided and to then start focusing on mundane subjects, because he loves for us to go down little rabbit holes to then debate over here, like, oh, were there real planes or were there no planes? Oh, was it thermite or was it this, or was it, it's like, these are details that really don't matter on the big picture. The big picture is our rights are being taken away. The foundation for the beast system of the end times is being set up to then control and be able to spy on every individual, taking our privacy away. A type of idea of 1984, the new Brave New World, Idiocracy, all these different type of movies are coming into reality, and that we are living in a real crazy story if you really look at it. So just really remember that. So that's why it's important to focus in on these so-called conspiracy theories, because there are evil men, and it's important for us Christians to remember we are children of light of the Most High God. Well, there's children of darkness of Satan. He has his own children as well that go out and do their work. And what's really sad is I know that they are laughing at us Christians because they really believe what they believe, just as we believe what we believe. But it's really shameful to see children of Satan serving Satan better than some children of light are serving the Most High God. And it's really, it breaks my heart to see that, because we are already on the winning side, but yet you have people that are on the losing side doing more for their God than we do for our God. So really focus and understand that we are truth tellers. Jesus was the truth and the way of the light. So then if we stand in truth and there's no darkness in us, we are going to expose darkness where we see it. And we see it here with this 9/11 narrative and what happened. So really tie back in and focus everything spiritual. What happens in the spiritual manifests in the physical. So what happened on 9/11 was 100% spiritual. I have zero doubt about that.
Yeah, to try to round out the our conversation that we've had for almost an hour now. And while I do this, if anyone has something they wanted to bring up, or even for themselves, any kind of lingering question that they might have, if you want to drop it in the comments, we'll try to at least bring it up and talk about it if we have some knowledge around it. Otherwise, we'll just mention it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are a lot of people who regard Christians as closed-minded, dogmatic, and going kind of those who go to sleep. Right?
Yep,
We're told what to believe, and we just go to sleep on everything else. I really do think that is the opposite of what the Christian faith is, and honestly, it's the opposite of what it has driven me to do. It has actually driven me to ask more questions, to look into more things. If it has caused me to search out and to seek out understanding into so many other areas and topics, and I think this is a great verse to really bring in here to discuss here. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but rather expose them, for the things they do in secret are shameful even to mention. I'll add verse 13, but all things being exposed by the light are made visible. So this is where I'll kind of end it. And this is where I think it doesn't really matter what your thought process is, your faith is, your worldview, all those different things. There are principles that we can all agree upon. And I think this is one of those, is to say something left in the darkness will continue to fester, but something brought into the light will be able to be examined and will not have power over you. Right.
Yep.
So whether you really do look at some of these things as having a spiritual component or not, the issue becomes, are you willing to bring something into the light, to look at it, to question it? It's because something that's not brought into the light is allowed to continue to do its work unhindered, right?
Yep.
If it's something valuable, that'll be seen in the light. If it's not, then you can deal with it. But to leave things off to the side, which is why I have a really difficult time with the concept of some of the censorship that's happening. The more we stop talking about things, the more we're not allowed to talk about things, the less understanding we'll have. And the more that just normal folks who don't focus on certain things will be forced to just use that information that they have to try to make these big decisions. And if you have a question, you need to ask it. It doesn't matter who you might upset, you need to ask the question. And when you discover something that's true, it has to be focused on. It has to be, things have to be brought into the light, focused on. And when it works in what everything else you can see in the light, that's where you have to put your focus to. That's what you have to look at. But for so many, they will leave things in the darkness. So, and what that means is you'll get together and maybe 2 or 3 people, and someone will want to talk about a topic, but they won't bring it up for fear that of what someone else might think. So they leave it in darkness. Well, whatever vacillation might come from that is going to be allowed to happen in the background without anyone there to help you. And I love that Trinity's here. Trinity loves that word community, right? It's just used so much and thrown around. But what real community is being able to bring something to people who you know and trust, who will love you regardless.
Mm-hmm.
If you're being an idiot, they'll tell you you're being an idiot.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's important for us to surround ourselves with wise people who care about us, who will be able to have these kinds of conversations. We need to bring these things to light. We need to discuss them. Otherwise, we all walk step by step in tow, just right into oblivion, because there's nothing we can do to stop anything. We just follow whoever is walking in front of us. That's what we want to try to expose. So maybe you're watching this today, listening to this today, and you've never thought to question anything like this. Maybe it's time to at least question. If your ideas and concepts and if the narrative stands up, it'll stand up, even if it's questioned. But if something's not allowed to be questioned, that becomes a dogma, and for some people, it can become their god. Right? So we use the phrase sometimes a sacred cow. What that means is it's something that is not able to be questioned. It's just something to be honored, and you don't ask the questions, and that is not a way to discover what's true.
100%.
So, any final words?
The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. Right? Like the smarter you get, the more you realize how dumb you are. Like
it's true.
It's just the nature of knowledge and wisdom that is given from God, and it's something that is critical to always remember. And another part that tie off what you were saying, how James talks about it in his book. If you know something is right and you don't do it, that's sin. So that's like the idea of sin of silence. If you know to say something in the idea of exposing the darkness or exposing what is going on, and you feel convicted from the Spirit to speak about it, but then you don't do it, that is a sin. So it's something very critical for us Christians to remember about how that operates, because a lot of us think, oh, as long as I just don't do this or that, I'm good, I'm not sinning. It's like, hey, you need to speak. You are a harbinger of truth. You need to speak against lies, and if you don't do that, you are sinning. It just is what it is. We have to keep remembering that we are spiritual soldiers. This is a spiritual war. We fight for the Most High God. So then you expose the darkness, you expose the light, all out of love, though, because it's easy for us. I know, at least early in my walk with conspiracies and everything, like you're saying, go into a community and feeling accepted and be able to speak your mind, but also don't come at it with a arrogance or a narcissistic type of view that you're better or you're smarter than whoever you're talking to because you see the truth and they are in lies and they're believing this lie, and you're this intellectual superior being. It's no, you need to come at them humble, come at them with the idea that, hey, I am a fool. I don't know why God's using me, but I'm just trying to relay some information He has been showing me. So here you go.
Yeah, and I would say if you're watching this and you don't have that kind of community, if you don't have anyone that you can ask questions to, one of the big reasons why we wanted to do not just this broadcast, but the channel, do some of the different things we do, is to be able to have a place where you can ask questions. Anyone who's honestly asking a question, let's talk about it. Let's look into it. There's not going to be anything that's really off topic or out of bounds or anything else, because it's important for us to be able to work through concepts and ideas together. And I really do think that for some people who may completely disagree with us, once we actually walk through a few different things, or even just some of our mindset and why we're questioning things or bringing things up, I think we'll actually find that we're not that far off from each other. We just may have different focuses, which means that us coming together and talking about it really does help us, because it enables us to learn from each other. So all that to say, again, condolences to anyone who might be feeling the weight of mourning or grief for those sort of things. And we're gonna add links to the description for all the things we talked about. And if anyone wants to continue the conversation, please do so in the comments. But we're gonna close off this live stream here. And anyway, I just want to say, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Go enjoy something. Be blessed. Right? Go out there and enjoy the things that God has provided for you. And all I can say is, Pilgrim on, my friends. We'll see you out there.
God bless.